Welcome to the Modern Horror Stories podcast. Yesterday we reviewed Late Night with the Devil, and today we're going to tell you how we would make that movie better. Kudos to the people who have actually made the movie, because we haven't made a movie. But that doesn't stop us from sharing our POVs on three things that we think would take the movie to another level. Something to bear in mind is if you haven't seen the film, there'll probably be spoilers in this video because we'll be talking about all the elements of the film. So with great respect, we're going to tell you how to improve it. Who wants to go first?
Okay, yes, I'll go first. And I'm just going to reiterate the amount of respect that's in this because we did all really enjoy the film. So if there's anybody who made this watching, this is all said in absolute love. So the first thing that I was thinking, and really it's in chronological order, is the opening sequence. So the opening sequence is this lovely sort of montage explaining the background, explaining what Night Owls with Jack Delroy is. There are all these kind of shots of trees and forests and strange goings on. For me, it was a wonderfully atmospheric sequence, but it gave away a little too much for me. By the end of the film, I think that opening sequence had told me too much, and I was sort of getting there a bit before I should have, which was a bit of a shame because it was done so nicely. And it looked beautiful, that opening sequence, and it sounded wonderful. It was just a bit overly long for me, and just had a bit too much information in there. I wanted to be given the opportunities to fill in those gaps. One of the other things that I had was pacing. Pacing didn't always work for me particularly well. I thought there were moments where it slowed down too much, moments where it sped up too much. Yeah, bits and pieces that just needed a little bit more finesse. And also the black and white sequences I've mentioned before. I thought stylistically, in quite a similar way to how I felt about the opening sequence, really. Stylistically, absolutely stunning. This brilliant change between the old cameras and the new ones, different kinds of shots, black and white instead of these kind of bright colors. But it felt like style over substance for me, I suppose. I could see why they were there. I could see why you'd make that distinction between onset and offset. But for me, it didn't seem to be doing that much for the film overall. But yeah, I'm just going to finish off with that I did really enjoy this film, and that all of my criticisms are absolutely qualified by that. So yeah, who would like to go next?
I'll go next. I also really enjoyed the film, and I agree with you about the black and white bits. I actually, it hadn't bothered me until you mentioned it, and then I thought, actually, you're right. It doesn't really work. And I was thinking of what I would do overnight to try and improve on that. I think what would have been so much better would have been if they just, instead of going to these black and white cameras that somehow were getting backstage, if they just left one of the studio cameras on, whichever one was last filming on air, if they just left that rolling, static, and whatever wanders into the shot and out of it, we get a glimpse of those interactions and the people when they're in there, when they're not presenting to the camera, or when they think they're not being seen. I think that would have been a lot more interesting and would have fit the style of the film and the feel of the film a lot better. And it could be more dramatic and exciting in a way if you just catch a glimpse of something as it's passing. You're like, oh, what are they talking about? Why does that person look so concerned, or whatever, rather than right up in their faces. And so yeah, I really agree with you on that. And I think that's how I would change that bit. I mentioned it yesterday that I wasn't a fan of the ending. I would have cut the film. There's a point where the film sort of ramps up to 10. Like I feel like it's slowly building, and then it ramps up to 10. I think I would end it there. Maybe even bring back the narrator to close it off. Fortunately, I didn't put the pieces together from the opening narration, so it didn't spoil the revelations for me. But I can appreciate that if it did. That would be really frustrating to not have the mystery. And the other thing I would change is, well, I said it yesterday as well, that when things do ramp up to 10, I would cut back on the VFX and even the scale of it, and just like the whole film is very intimate, I feel, even though it's a national TV broadcast. I feel it's very, very intimate, the relationship between the performers and the studio audience and the home audience, and with each other. And I would bring the climax of the film, I would make that more intimate as well.
So yeah, I think you guys have made some nice improvements there. James, I actually thought you were going to steal one of mine,
Oh.
even though you didn't know what I was going to say, because I also thought about how they could improve the black and white sections. Okay, but my solution was different. My solution is that you see the whole show as someone would have seen it at home. So when they go to an ad break, you go to an ad break,
Oh, brilliant.
That's
and
nice. Yeah.
you see all the either recreate like brand new adverts like that are kind of parody adverts of the time, or just actually show adverts from way back then and really emphasize the fact that you're seeing this chunk of footage that's just been recorded and lifted.
Also, sorry to interrupt, Dave, but
Okay.
you've just given me a thought. It's if the adverts, if you could, because you could solve two problems in one by cutting down that opening sequence and then feeding the information subliminally through the adverts. So all of that information that you get in the start, instead, you're getting it through the adverts. And that would get sorry, and carry on.
No, I agree, and I that was definitely. I think you could either use the adverts as like I say, just a literal cutaway to normality, or actually seed the adverts with extra information, which is kind of playing with the format. It's destroying the reality that it was existing in a real world by seeding the adverts. But I think that works really well as a movie. So that's how I would have maybe changed the black and white elements. I don't think I disliked them as much as you two anyway, but I did feel like there was something else you could done. I think maybe we're on a DVD release. They have both versions. So either you can see the adverts that were broadcast at the time, or we can have this backstage thing. So the second thing I came up with was quite a small thing, and it annoyed me about the film at the time. And that is there's an interaction where the psychic talks to a guy in the audience called Peterman. And it's a nice little comedy set piece where the psychic gets everything wrong. But it's so perfect. And the audience members' responses are such great one-liners. I felt this not quite sure about this. I think it might have been more realistic if Jack Delroy had been coming up with these one-liners. But to have the audience member themselves so on point with all these kind of witty kickbacks, um, I would have changed that. And the last thing, again, I wrestled with the idea of how to improve the ending. It's not a horrible ending, but I do feel it maybe they could have been another way to go with it. And so I went completely. Although I've just criticised the black and white segments, I was thinking at the point it says station difficulties. So again, spoilers coming up. You get to the end, there's lots of carnage in the studio, and then it just cuts to a caption that says station difficulties. And that's kind of like the end of the show. Then it goes into I'm not quite sure what it is, whether it's something that's occurring in Jack's mind or it goes into something. And instead of that, I was thinking after station difficulties, you cut back to the black and white cameras and you see total carnage in the studio with like demons popping out of this girl's head because her head's split open. And the demons running around the studio, hacking up the people. And it will be in black and white, so I think it wouldn't be as gory as it sounds. And the ending would be you hear the police sirens arriving and the police coming through the doors. and they're confronted with this studio of complete carnage. There's one person left there, and it's an audience member who's quite prominent in the whole show because he's dressed as the devil.
Yes.
And I would believe he's the only person who's left untouched. And he's sitting in a kind of like frozen state, covered in blood from all the carnage. That's my
Has
that's my alternative ending. Not saying it's better, but it's different.
It is different.
I actually love that. I love that. I know I said I was thinking it should be more intimate and more grounded, but I actually love the idea of it actually going way bigger than it did. And yeah, that poor audience member just like
I quite like, maybe if, because I love the idea of having that last audience member, but I'm not as keen on the demons just because I want to believe that Jack was responsible for as much of the killing as possible. So I wonder if you could just have that final shot. You're just focused the entire time on that audience member. So instead of seeing all of the carnage, you just see this one audience member's reaction to all of the carnage.
That could work with James's idea as well of the stationary camera.
Yes,
The
yeah.
carnage just going in front of this.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So maybe the camera moves a bit because something's pushing the camera or something like that. But most of the time you just have this stationary camera just fixed upon the guy with the devil. Yeah.
yeah, because of course the camera crew would be trying their best to run for their lives. They wouldn't be.
Yes, yeah, exactly. The camera would probably, just you'd run away from the camera as quickly as possible. I would anyway.
Unless they were extremely dedicated to that.
Yes, yeah.
I think the irony now is if the devil did surface in a studio environment, people would just pull out their mobile phones and start.
Yeah.
Totally.
No one would
And
run
then
away.
all the comments would be going, "Oh, this is AI generated. There's no way this is real." Everyone be going, "I saw the devil. I did. I promised."
Yeah.
There's probably a feature on the iPhone at the moment. Add devil.
That must be.
Yeah.
If there isn't, they should get on with that.
So that's how we have made Late Night with the Devil a slightly better movie. If you've got ideas of how you would make Late Night with the Devil a better movie, put them in the comments below. And join us next week for another Modern Horror Stories podcast.